What's up, everybody? So I started off going one way with this video and went off on a tangent that is basically the whole video. So let me see if I can put this together in some kind of coherent sequence. And this probably isn't going to be me trying to make any definitive points. I'm just thinking things out loud. You don't just get out of the car at the trailhead and voila, you're on top of the mountain. There's a lot of steps that get you there. So I'm just taking you guys up the trail with me to somewhere that I've never been. I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff out here so that we're all looking at the same scenery, and then we'll see if we can make heads or tails of things. Let's start out with this. I'm reading more Eustace Mullins here. So he tells the story of how the fallen angels landed on, he says Mount Carmel here. I was thinking it was Mount Hermon. But then they took the daughters of men as wives and taught them magic, and their offspring were the Nephilim, the giants. The Bible doesn't mention the Nephilim specifically, neither does Strong's Concordance, but Nelson's Concordance has several listings under Nephilim, where Genesis 6:4 is translated, the Nephilim were in the earth in those days. These giants later came to be known as the sons of Anak. Numbers 13:33 says, and we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. By the time you get to Joshua, there were none of the Anakims left. These early giants would be considered as mutations by modern scientists. Because of their parentage, they had habits and lusts which horrified their neighbors. Their leader, Shaitan, also known as Satana, was the serpent who entered into and seduced Eve, producing the first red rummer Cain. Not only were the Nephilim a menace to others, their uncontrollable hatred and violence sometimes led them to attack each other, and then they ate each other. According to some accounts, God deleted them while the archangel Michael imprisoned the fallen angels in deep chasms in the earth. In Greek mythology, the Titans got locked inside the earth. Kind of everybody has a myth of the underworld. The Popol Vuh has the hero twins going down and dealing with the underworld overlords. And now this has got me questioning who we're really talking about with the Shambhala thing and the ruler under the earth. I've heard a lot of people speculate that the Nephilim were genetically altered, which we'll talk about in a bit. The Book of Zohar stresses the Babylonian legend that the demons originated from the actual congress between humans and demonic powers. So if the fallen angels and mortal women had the offspring of the Nephilim, then are demons the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim? There's going to be some open-ended, unanswered questions here. Just thinking out loud. The study of demonology in history discloses answers to otherwise inexplicable aspects of man's history. Like, why are there so many atrocities, like listed right there, which bear little or no relation to mankind's day-to-day routine of tilling the soil, raising families, and maintaining the standards of civilization? I was listening to Tim Dillon on Rogan yesterday, and he says, I have never woke up, got a cup of coffee, and thought, hey, we should go and exterminate all the people of so-and-so land. Regular people don't think like that, but our history is full of these reprehensible acts. Because of their extraordinary powers, demons have always attracted a certain number of followers on Earth. Secret organizations which insist on concealing their rights and their programs from all outsiders must do so in order to prevent exposure and the inevitable punishment. While they were wandering in the desert, the Hebrew tribes worshiped demons and monsters. They revered their mythical monsters, Leviathan, Behemoth, and Rahib, who well may have been the survivors of the tribe of giants, the Nephilim. They also made sacrifices to the demon of the desert, Azazel. Read the Old Testament, and every time you turn around, they're worshiping some new entity. And just so you know, the Star of David is actually the Star of Remphan or Moloch. And like I've covered before, I think the events of the Old Testament are mixing up the stories. Like, I don't know, King Solomon using demons to build a temple to God instead of angels. Wouldn't that make more sense? I mean, just imagine you're in this big, beautiful cathedral and the priest tells you, oh yeah, well, this was all built by evil spirits. But don't worry, we're worshiping a benevolent God here. And then that priest says, yeah, I've got a ring that put all of these jinn under my control. Would you be inviting that priest over to dinner with your family? I would think there's something fishy going on. Their mythology developed a certain hierarchy of demons. A demonarch, who presumably was Shaitan, ruled over all demons on earth. He was also known as the Prince of Evil, Bealiah, meaning Yahweh is Baal. Okay, that is a huge statement, and for some people, if you're new to my channel, that's probably a shocker. So I've always heard that the name Baal just means Lord in Hebrew. But just the context it's being used in here, the demonarch who ruled over all of the demons, also known as the Prince of Evil, Bealiah, and then next up is Asmodeus. So in Hebrew, it is Lord or owner, and a really interesting example they use here, a Baal of wings was a winged creature. Some have pointed towards Yahweh being a dragon. Anyway, Baal was also supposed to be the name of the storm god in Canaanite culture. I've got a video talking about this, and some suggest that Baal morphed into Yahweh. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think I came to the conclusion that there was a whole pantheon of gods that were in charge of running everything here. And being the storm god was just a job that had transferred from Baal to Yahweh over time. It made a lot of sense with the stuff I was reading in that video. But Baal means different things to different people at different times, apparently. Now, the weird thing is, I've heard many times how Baal means Lord in Hebrew, but you go all through Strong's Concordance, and they don't use the term Baal at all. At least not that I've seen. Now, one of the spellings that Mullins used here, I believe, is Bealiah, or Yahovah is Lord, Yah is Lord, or even possessed of Yah. And the name signifies putting Jehovah in his rightful place as Lord or ruler of the manifest. Well, okay, that all sounds legit, right? Pretty much how things should be, right? Now, let me ask you something, just asking for a friend. Who's the ruler of this world? Seriously, look around at what's going on in every single country in at least the Western world right now, and tell me how the loving, benevolent Father of Jesus is running the show. In fact, let's see who Jesus says is the ruler of this world. Rutrow, he says it's Satan and that the world is under the control of evil. At the different levels of initiation, the same writings have different meanings for different people. So while it all sounds perfectly innocent that Jehovah is in his rightful place as the ruler of this world, the neophyte thinks, well, yeah, God rules the world, but the higher adepts understand who the ruler of this world is. Now, the other spelling he used, Belial, who is a demon or even the devil himself, Simeon 5:3 says, fornication separates men from God and brings him near to Belial. Everybody knows about the freak rituals and the things that they do. Usually, when a name ends with L, it means blank of God. And let me address this. They also made sacrifices to the demon of the desert, Azazel. In the oldest parts of the Old Testament, before Yahweh comes along, God is referred to as El, like El Shaddai, but that is actually one God out of the Elohim. So all of the angels' names end in El, Raphael, Mikael, and they all mean the such and such of God. So Azazel was obviously one of the fallen angels. And then there's Samael, who supposedly became the Shaitan. Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates and all artifacts of war, and taught women to use makeup and jewelry. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. In the book of Enoch, on the day of great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. Now, this is referred to in the Bible as well, but it goes into greater detail in the Babylonian Holy Book. But on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, they do this ritual. And I'm going to shorten this up some, but they had a wooden box and there were two labels in there. One inscribed for Yahweh and the other for Azazel. The high priest then laid his hands with the labels upon the two goats and said, a sin offering to Yahweh. And two other men said, blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. And that's it. That's Yahweh's goat. He then fastened a scarlet woolen thread to the head of the goat for Azazel, and laying his hands upon it, again recited the following confession of sin and prayer for forgiveness. And shortening this up, O Lord, forgive the iniquities, transgressions, and sins that I and my whole household have committed before thee. As it is written in the law of Moses, for on this day he will forgive you to cleanse you from all your sins before the Lord, ye shall be clean. That is the prayer being said for the goat to Azazel. You can pause and read this again, but the goat for Yahweh, they just say, blessed be the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. And then they move on to the goat for Azazel. So we'll just leave that on the table as well and move forward. This isn't going to be a video for people with short attention spans. You're going to have to get through the whole thing to make any kind of sense of this. And if you're new here, they did just turn that last video on, first video in about 3 months that got out to new people. Welcome. I've got some pretty different ideas when it comes to the Old Testament of the Bible. So before you scream and run away, calling me names, please hear me out here. First off, none of anything that I've presented on this channel is disparaging towards Jesus in any way. So if you're a Christian, I'm not trying to screw that up for you in any way here. But I'm going to say some things that set off your defense mechanisms. This is from Exodus, as Yahweh is leading Moses and the tribe out of Egypt up to the northeast, the land of the Canaanites. And he says, I'm going to give you this land, but it's already occupied by people. And let's be perfectly honest. That's like if you were walking down the street and God said, hey, I'm going to give you this brand new truck. Here, it's yours. And you hop in and drive off. But it's somebody else's truck. Actually, it'd be a big step beyond that. The driver of the truck is in the truck, and you have to off the driver before you can take it. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here because most of us, for the longest time, I couldn't even let myself think the thoughts here. So just stick with me for a minute. But they ascended by the south and came to Hebron, where the sons of Anak were. And they cut down a branch of one cluster of grapes that they bear on a staff between two people. There were also huge pomegranates and figs. And these are the scouts that they sent out to do recon that we're talking about here. But they came back and said, yeah, it's surely the land of milk and honey. The cities are walled and the people are huge. Now, I can't believe I just found this picture portraying that, the big, huge bundle of grapes. And this is probably more period accurate. If you guys have been following along with my timeline work, then I think all of this happened around the Middle Ages, like 1,000 years ago, 1,500 tops. And if you're new, before you scoff at this, go watch my videos. There's a lot of evidence backing this up. But everything in the land is huge. They're vegetables and fruits. And if these sons of Anak were genetically modified, that wouldn't affect the garden at all. And actually, if you were told this story out of context with no preconceived notions, this would sound like a pretty blessed land where all the people are big, strong, and mighty, and even the fruits and vegetables. And if we were being told this story from the Canaanite perspective, which we don't have any anymore, it would sound a lot like Plato's dialogue with the Egyptians, where you Hellenes, you Greeks, are but a tiny remnant of the ancient men of renown. So let's finish out this story with the parts that everybody always leaves out. And if you can, throw away your preconceived notions of Yahweh. Unless you've already seen my other videos on this, then you know where I'm going. Just remember, it was the Catholic, the universal church, that has told you that Yahweh of the Old Testament was the father of Jesus. Throw in the idea of the Trinity, and, Jesus is the Father, and the Father is Yahweh from the Old Testament, but all evidence to the contrary here. Yahweh leads the tribe out of Egypt, and they are coming up on this land of milk and honey where it appears everything is perfect. And Yahweh says, I'm going to give you this land. All you have to do is go G-side everybody that's there. The scouts come back and say, look, we are grasshoppers in the sight of these people. They are huge. They have big walled cities. And they're understandably terrified to go try to attack and steal this, because that's what they're doing. They're stealing their land. And remember, you've been taught that Jesus is one with the Father, and the Father is Yahweh from the Old Testament. So by proxy, Yahweh is Jesus, so are these the words of Jesus? Does this sound like the words of Jesus here? The tribe is terrified to go attack this fortified city full of giants, and Yahweh says, "How long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? I've heard them murmuring against me. So Moses, say unto them, your carcasses shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to the whole number, from 20 years old and upwards, which have murmured, shall not come into the land. But your little ones, they shall know the land. But as for you, everyone over 20 years old, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness." So he's going to off everyone over 20 years old. That's what that's saying. "And your children, everyone under 20, will wander in this wilderness for 40 years until your carcasses be wasted. Since your scouts did recon for 40 days, then each day for a year, then your children will wander around lost for 40 years. I will surely do it unto all this evil congregation that are gathered together against me. In this wilderness ye shall be consumed, and there ye shall die." So you're telling me that Jesus said that? Seriously? This is Yahweh saying, since you dare to question me, I'm going to off everybody over 20, and then everyone that's left is going to wander around 40 years, 100 times more than the 40 days that you spent scouting this area. And then those scouts that Moses sent out, even those men that did bring up the evil report upon the land, died by the plague before the Lord. So Yahweh offed the scouts that just reported what they saw. Now let's look at this on a timeline, and I'm going to make a couple speculative adjustments here. And I'm just saying, what if? What if Moses was around 800 AD and the time of Jesus was about 1200 AD, like Famiko suggests? If you're new here, that probably sounds absolutely insane, but go check out my work. I've shown how they've added a lot of time on our official history, so I think they've probably done it here too. But the timeline thing here is just kind of a side note. Now, let's put the fallen angels and the Nephilim right here before Noah and the flood. And we'll make a note that God was El and Azazel was an angel of God before becoming a fallen angel and a demon of the desert. And then in Moses' time, Yahweh shows up, which just means I am that I am. I am the powerful one, and don't you dare question me. You saw what happened to your scouts. And then down around this time, they're making sacrifices to Yahweh and Azazel, and it sounds a lot like they're asking Azazel for the forgiveness. They are also saying that the sons of Anak are living in the land of Canaan. So with the flood being right here, then that's saying one of two things. Either the flood didn't take out all of the Nephilim, or the sons of Anak aren't the remnants of the Nephilim. It's kind of got to be one or the other. Now, they say to Azazel, you can attribute all corruption of mankind and the earth. Would you attribute to that being an amazing gardener and growing supersized fruits and vegetables? And creating a land of milk and honey that outsiders look at and say, wow, these guys are a lot better than us. Sorry, but I can't help but think of this in a way where it sounds like the sons of Anak are living in harmony with nature and have a thriving land around them. And then Yahweh tells them to go up there and G-side everybody after what he had just done in Egypt. Let's do it this way. And I'm going to combine academic history with biblical history here. So after Moses red rums an Egyptian, then Yahweh says, yep, that's my boy right there. All throughout the Old Testament, Yahweh always picks the worst people to be his front man. Jacob stole Esau's inheritance because he was starving after being out hunting for a long time, and Jacob saw that as an opportunity to steal everything he had. And then he tricks his father into making him think that he is Esau, and he steals his blessing from his father. Then he flees up to Anatolia, does some shady dealings, and basically steals all his uncle's flocks. And then when heading back down to his homeland, then God says, hey, you're my boy. So Yahweh likes to pick liars and cheats and red rummers. So after Moses red rums the Egyptian, he picks him to be his lead guy. And instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to go to Pharaoh and he's going to let you guys go and I'm going to take you guys to this beautiful paradise. Nope. Yahweh hardens Pharaoh's heart so he can inflict as much pain and suffering on the Egyptians as he possibly can. These are some of the miracles of Yahweh. Turn the river to blood, a plague of frogs, a plague of insects, a plague of flies, boils on the skin, fire raining down from heaven, 3 days of darkness, and finally, the offing of every firstborn son in Egypt. Once again, does this sound like what Jesus would do? What would Jesus do here? Yahweh made it clear that he wanted all of the nations around to fear him. If this is the one true God, why didn't he just say, well, go tell them that they've got it wrong, and then they'll learn to love me? So then, after doing all that to the land of Egypt, then they come up to the land of Canaan. And I've already told you what happens once they get there. Okay, now let's look at academic history. You have the Hyksos, who came from the land of Canaan. They came in and conquered Egypt, and it's debatable whether it was through subversion or through actual conquest. Most people think that it was through subversion. And that actually lines up with the biblical account of Joseph becoming an advisor to Pharaoh. And essentially what he did while he was there is he knew the famine was coming. He got Pharaoh to stock up all the food, but then when the famine hit, he started selling it back to the Egyptians. And after he had taken all their money, then he says, well, you've still got yourselves, so you can sell yourself to me. And basically enslaved all of the Egyptians. The secular version of this is that the 15th dynasty, known as the Hyksos, came in and took power through subversion, and then eventually were expelled by the 18th dynasty. Hyksos means rulers of a foreign land, and they worshipped Set, the dark god of Egyptian mythology, as to where the Egyptians worshipped the sun god, Ra. And just so you know, the Hebrews do everything backwards. Where everybody else kept track of time through the days, the Hebrews keep track of time through the night by the moon. To them, the day starts at dark, not at sun up. Also, every other culture in the world considers your lineage from your father's side of the family, but not them. They consider it from your mother's side of the family. And I have a theory on that, is if one of your women goes and seduces the king of another land and they have a son, well, by the other land's rules, then that son is the rightful ruler of their land, but by Hebrew tradition, he belongs to the Hebrews because of the mother. Anyway, when you get down to the core tenets of everything is an inversion. But the Hyksos worshipped the evil god Set, who was a donkey-headed god. And you can see my video on this, how at 2 separate times in Hebrew history, people went into the Holy of Holies in King Solomon's temple, and there was a donkey-headed god in there. And then the Hyksos were expelled out of Egypt. Okay, now let's tie together biblical and secular history here. The Hebrews, the Hyksos, were in Egypt, and they worshiped Set, the donkey-headed evil god. The Bible says that Yahweh heard the suffering of his people and decided to lead them out of Egypt. Secular history says they were finally able to kick these foreign rulers out. Well, since they worshiped this dark god, then they probably made it hard on them. So you've got the 10 plagues of Egypt. So now Yahweh, after inflicting all of this pain and suffering on Egypt, is leading the tribe through the desert up to Canaan, where the tribe sends scouts into the land of Canaan, and they see the sons of Anak and big, beautiful vegetables and fruits and the land of milk and honey, and it sounds like a paradise up there. But they're scared to go up against them, and they tell this to everybody in the tribe, and Yahweh says, "You dare question me? Well, I'm going to off everybody over the age of 20, everybody under the age of 20, you're going to wander around through the wilderness for the next 40 years. So are we talking about a loving, caring Yahweh, God, creator of the universe here? Or does Yahweh sound like some dark god that visits plagues and pestilence and suffering on the people that he doesn't like? And even supposedly the people he does like if they dare to question him. Now let's go back to the beginning. While they were wandering in the desert, the tribes worshipped demons and monsters. They revered their mythical monsters, Leviathan, Behemoth, and Rahib, who well may have been survivors of the tribe of giants, the Nephilim. They also made sacrifices to the demon of the desert, Azazel. Their mythology developed a certain hierarchy of demons. A demonarch, who presumably was Satan, ruled over all the demons on earth. He was also known as the Prince of Evil, Bealiah, meaning Yahweh is Baal. Now, this was written by Eustace Mullins, and he wrote that, and then he goes right back to the traditional way of thinking about the Bible. Like I said earlier, most people won't even allow themselves to think these thoughts, but he just spelled out right there that Yahweh is Baal, and then completely ignored that for the whole rest of the book and just went back to traditional thinking. So I'm just going to go back to this timeline right here where Yahweh just shows up at this point in history and says, I am that I am. And that, I'm the God of your fathers. And they used to call me by different names, but from now on, for now through eternity, you're going to call me Yahweh. So I think at this point, this won't be too much of a shocking statement, but I think it's possible that Yahweh is either one of the fallen angels or one of the demon offspring. And if you've actually made it this far through the video, then you probably understand why I'm questioning everything here. If this is all a new concept to you, just remember that it's the Church of Rome who, the Catholic Church literally means the universal church, where they really didn't care what you believed. They just wanted to incorporate all beliefs into one world religion. That is the Antichrist one world religion right there. And people 300 and 400 years ago referred to it as such. Our forefathers here in America that came over after the Protestant Reformation, they all called the Church of Rome the Antichrist. So if this is all new to you, just understand that it's the Church of Rome that said that the father of Jesus is Yahweh of the Old Testament. The original Christians didn't think that, like Marcion. But now that you've heard this, go back and read the Old Testament for yourself, and instead of Lord or Yahweh, put the name Jesus in there and see if it all makes sense. Yeah, Jesus said, oh, you dare to murmur against me? Well, then every one of you over 20, you're going to die here in this wilderness. Everybody under 20, you're going to wander around for the next 40 years, and then I'll take you to the promised land. Because you dared to question me, the all-powerful Jesus. It makes no sense. Because that's not what it is. Yahweh is Baal. Or in Egyptian, Set. I think that's enough for one video. That'll keep you busy for a couple days. Static out.